Good evening. My name is Nehama Rogozen, and I'm here to talk about my capstone project, which looked at different programs that address human rights abuses in global supply chains. I worked with Article 1 Advisors, which is a small consulting company that is helping a variety of companies address human rights issues. This sweater that I have here has a number of components. The tag says made in Bangladesh, but the cotton was likely picked in Uzbekistan, which is known for high degrees of child labor in the cotton industry. The thread was probably made in China, the buttons in Vietnam, and then it was put together in Bangladesh by somebody who was paid just over $1 a day. Look around the room. It's highly likely that the products we're wearing, we're using, the food that we're eating was made by slaves or touched by slavery at some point in the supply chain. But it's also highly likely that some of our things were made in factories, where workers were paid a fair wage, where women had access to empowerment programs, or that the cotton and the clothing that we're wearing was produced ethically and organically, such as the cotton that is produced under the Better Cotton Initiative program. So what and who determines manufacturing processes? What are the methods by which our things get to us, and what has happened along that supply chain that determines if there are human rights abuses or not? I'm making this sound very simplistic, as if our things are simply made in a factory, put on a boat, taken to a store, and we buy them and use them at that point. That's clearly not the case in our globalized world today, where pursuit of the lowest possible margins and profit are the goals. Supply chains are increasingly getting more complex, longer, and harder to manage. This is where we find ourselves today. This makes protecting human rights even more difficult. Decisions are made in many places along supply chains. There are many stakeholders and decision makers who determine the degree to which human rights are respected or abused. My capstone project focused on the relationship between companies and their tier 1 supplier at the first level of the supply chain. This picture is from a supplier factory in Bangladesh, which produces for H&M. H&M is known for consistently scoring high on promotion of worker rights, but also promotes unsustainable fast fashion trends. I wanted to quickly mention some of the relevant international agreements that affect this field. We're all familiar with the UN Declaration of Human Rights from 1948, and more recently we have the UN Global Compact and the Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, which lay out how businesses should be promoting human rights. However, that is not effective, as evidenced by the 2013 Rana Plaza collapse in Bangladesh, which was an 8-story factory housing 5,000 garment workers. When the building collapsed, 1,129 people were killed. Historically, a human rights approach to business has meant an audit-based approach. Internal or external auditors inspect supplier factories to make sure that workers are treated well, working conditions are safe, there's no kids working in the factory, and so on. However, auditing, whether it's announced or unannounced, is just simply not effective. Workers often don't feel comfortable speaking up, managers threaten workers, suggestions are not acted upon, and the approach pits companies against suppliers, against managers, against workers. Improvement, when it does happen, tends to be at the minimum level necessary to avoid losing contracts. My research has shown that there's a shift in this model to a model where companies are helping suppliers feel empowered to do the right thing for the right reason, not out of fear of audits. Tragic events such as Rana Plaza have led consumers to question where their things are coming from. Companies and suppliers are not only responding to this, but increasingly starting to see the business case for promoting human rights. Protecting human rights lowers risks that affect the bottom line and creates happier, more productive workers. Empowered and fairly paid workers are an asset to suppliers, as they tend to stay longer, produce higher quality work, and engage in effective dialogue with management. Increasingly, what makes sense for human rights is also what makes sense for business. I sought to understand this trend and identify the different ways in which companies approach human rights in their supply chain. I identified 6 different categories that companies can use. They are directly engaging with workers, such as providing worker empowerment programs, building the capacity of suppliers to promote human rights, prioritizing suppliers through a human rights lens, tracing the key inputs and commodities in products, utilizing leverage to push industries towards better behaviors, and providing grievance mechanisms to employees and communities that feel that they have been affected. I don't have the time to dive into each of these deeply, but I'll talk about one example of capacity building. H&M's Index Code of Conduct rewards suppliers for good sustainability performance with better business. The program encourages suppliers to take ownership of social and environmental impacts and offers incentives such as strategic supplier status, larger orders, and long-term contracts up to 5 years. So what have I learned during my capstone? I'm realizing that the role of the private sector in development practice is complex. Companies are not always the evil entities that we make them out to be. At the end of the day, companies are people making decisions, and they usually want to do the right thing and have a sense of purpose. By demonstrating the business case of respecting human rights to companies and suppliers, improvement can be made in the ways companies source products and the ways that workers manufacture those products. There's a long way to go. As I mentioned at the beginning, most of our products are connected to human rights abuses in some ways. But with this shift towards empowerment of suppliers, progress is being made. One factory, one supplier, and one company at a time. Thank you. Questions? Yeah, Genevieve?
So you mentioned that your research was with tier 1 suppliers, which is like the first layer of the supply chain. But how do they know that there are human rights abuses below that, and how do you address the fact that it is so complex?
That's a really good question. Most companies are really only at the stage right now where they can evaluate tier 1 suppliers because they're not the ones directly relating to tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. And that slide that I showed that shows how interconnected they are, at this point it's really impossible to trace all the way down. But Nestle is a really interesting example of a company that is trying to get at the second and third level suppliers. They have 12 key areas, 12 key inputs for most of the products they make. So that's things like sugar, palm oil, cocoa, and they've committed to mapping all of those second levels as well. And right now they're getting pretty good. 38% of that is right now able to be mapped, and they're working on getting it to 100%. Yeah, Alex?
I'm in the corporate social responsible investing class, which is surprisingly interesting. And I was wondering, where you're seeing the motivation for this coming from. Has pressure, I know from the ESG perspective that it's really difficult to delve into the human rights area because it's so hard to certify and blah, blah, blah. So is it because of the end consumer, or do you see it coming from a shareholder perspective? Or?
I think there's a lot of different components, and you're right, it's really complicated. I think when these large events happen, for example, the Nike sweatshop scandal in the 90s, that started pushing Nike and other companies to look at that and say, hey, this is an issue. And a lot of the time, it's honestly just coming from companies not knowing. And now we're at this point in the world where companies know, and you basically have to assume that there is slavery or there are human rights abuses in supply chains. It's not an excuse anymore to not know. So companies who are stepping up, they're doing it kind of to mitigate the risk, but I also want to think that they're also doing it for the right reasons as well. So.
Yeah, this is right, that the company is going to be caught violating human rights and legal laws and all of this, right? So one approach is to use crowdsourcing to kind of denounce abuse. There's an interesting scheme that originated actually with students in public policy here called Workers' Voices. Mm-hmm. They work in Bangladesh, and it's basically to organize a scheme where you can denounce violation of workers' rights or kind of safety conditions and whatever. And so you may want to look at kind of concrete cases that this is supported by the parents who don't want to be caught in a bad situation for them.
Yeah, thank you. Worker Voices is a really interesting group, and I talked to some people from there. One of the 6 categories I had was provision of grievance mechanisms. So one of those is there's something called the Labor Link platform, which was developed by Cisco and is supported by Goodwill Solutions, and it allows factory workers to talk to kind of upper management at different levels. There's surveys that are sent out, and workers say, I'm being treated well, I'm not being treated well, this is an issue, this is, whatever. And you can also deliver training programs through this platform. And pretty much everyone has a cell phone now, so it utilizes a really important tool.